You should never get in bed with your rivals, or the past is the past. Let's focus on the future. Opinions sure were split across the blue lines of Melbourne this week as the most successful Melbourne City men's coach in their club's history, Patrick Kisnorbo, confirmed his switch to the Victory. That managerial move was one of three this week that confirms our roster for the 2024-25 A-League men's season. The Socceroos learn their fate for what they're hoping will be their final round of World Cup qualification, but a late change in the FIFA rankings means that their drawn group will not be quite as comfortable as perhaps we first thought. More whispers around the NST are bubbling as Football Australia readies to reveal their final list of the inaugural teams, and the European Championships head into the knockout rounds on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast, supported by Deploy Football. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me today is Jacob Stevens. We've talked about our England-Italy allegiances many times already. We've just seen the draws from the round of 16. One or two of us are going to be completely unbearable in roughly a week's time.
Yeah, well, it's already been pretty unbearable in the group chat so far, so I can only imagine how bad it will get.
All right. Well, the pattern, as usual, during this period is we'll get to the Euros and the Copa America at the end. But let's stay focused on Australia for now. And Patrick Kisnorbo has swapped City Blue for Navy Blue, crossing Melbourne Derby lines, becoming the first A-League men's coach to do so after Joe Montemiro went the opposite way in the women's competition. Kisnorbo was apparently sounded out for the Canberra role, but delays in that expansion for the men's team put that to bed, and Victory were coming in to swoop. Now, we put a piece out on this on Round Ball Australia, got some reaction from fans, and from what I can gauge, most Melbourne City fans are not too pleased with this move, which you can understand because Kisnorbo was wildly successful during his time at Melbourne City. He's got an A-League Women's Championship, two men's Premier's plates, and then an A-League Men's Championship as well. That's a big deal for them. That's their most successful period, and that coach has now just jumped across town, not just to coach the Victory, but complimenting the fans and how he's admired them from a distance and how he's excited. He understands, the responsibility of leading such a big club. Even just the words that come out of that first press conference, you don't love to hear that as a Melbourne City fan. And Jacob, he's done all the right things. He's coming in, he's complimenting the fans. He's saying he wants to play fast, attacking football, which is what the fans have been crying out for, especially the last year. Even, with their success under Tony Popovich making the grand final, it's still been that complaint of the way they've gone about it. It does feel like the fan opinion on the Victory side is a little more split. As Christian said, there is definitely a part that says, Patrick Kisnorbo is a Melbourne City legend. He's a former captain. They've now got two former Melbourne City captains in Patrick Kisnorbo and Bruno Fornaroli on their books, which is funny enough. And there is the other half that say, well, we've got him now. He's a very successful coach and he's now at our club. So on paper that, presents the opportunity for him to also have success at our club.
Yeah, it's a tough one because normally with these sorts of things, when it's like a player, for instance, that switches, it's pretty clear cut that the team that they're leaving absolutely despises them, and then the team that they come into, loves them all of a sudden, right? I mean, we saw it recently with Milos Ninkovic going to the Wanderers, right? And how all of a sudden Sydney fans just despised him and the Wanderers loved him. But with this, it's a bit strange in that there is that sort of schism in the Victory support where half are kind of, I guess a bit cautiously optimistic that, hang on, you've got a proven coach here and, he's shown, he's saying he wants to play fast attacking football. And that's the thing a lot of coaches say when they come into these roles, right? Is that they want to say the things that are going to, get the fans on their side. But he's shown that that's the sort of football that he likes to have his teams play. So it's not just a case of, empty platitudes. It's this guy can actually do what he's saying. And I think that that's probably the most exciting thing for Victory fans. But the big issue is in terms of the squad and how much leeway does he get in terms of being able to bring in who he wants to bring in to be able to have the squad playing the sort of football that he wants to play, and how long do fans give him before they turn on him if he can't get players in time, that's the other side of the coin. So no, it's definitely an interesting situation. It'll be fun to see how it plays out. I personally think that it'll be great because it'll bring a bit of spice back to the Melbourne Derby, which obviously it was still there a little bit with Fornaroli, but something like this is even bigger than that, and it could really bring back a little bit of that that anger that has, I think, been missing, at least between the two teams. That's ignoring, anger or other things. But, between the two teams, it's been, it's dying out a little bit. And this could be something to really reignite that. So from a neutral's perspective, that's probably the most exciting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the squad. I think that must have been a very important part of the equation when they made this decision, because the idea in a competitively balanced league with the salary cap and things like that is that, teams go up and they come down, they ride these waves and they go through phases. Melbourne Victory, Christian, are in the phase where they should be taking tilts at trophies right now. They have the squad to do it. I don't think they're likely to lose, apart from Damien De Silva, who's already gone. They're not likely to lose a lot of their core players, where we know a team like the Mariners are having a lot of their key players stripped away from them. You'd probably expect Welling to improve as well. They're kind of riding that upward trajectory. But Victory's squad are in a phase where they should be challenging now. And if you look at the other options, Mark Milligan was rumoured as a potential candidate as well. I think, they look at the foundations that have been built over the last 3 years under Tony Popovich. It feels like there wasn't a whole lot of appetite to go through another kind of step up in that building phase. They want to get someone in now. And Kisnorbo, probably out of all the options they had the best CV to say he's probably the most likely manager to win them a championship this season. I'm not saying he will do that, but he's probably the most likely.
Yeah, you look at someone like Mark Milligan. Obviously, he's another club legend. He's captain the club, but if you bring him in, it's sort of like you're saying to the fans, it's another rebuilding process. Whereas, you bring in someone like Patrick Kisnorbo, who's been there, done that, experience. He's won championships before. He knows what it's like to win titles. And like you said, Lockie, this is a team built that's built to win now. It's not for the future. It's not a lot of, there's a few youngsters in there, but the majority of the core squad is, built to win something. And, obviously just falling short at the final hurdle last season in the grand final, obviously that stung. But at the same time, it just shows how close, this club are to winning a championship. And if you bring someone of the quality, the experience of Kisnorbo, and the tools that he can implement into this side, get his ideas across, I think it's very promising for him. So yeah, like Jacob said, it's all about that side of the coin where you just got to give him time just to get his ideas in place. It might take a bit of time, but in the end, we just got to judge him for what he does at the end of the season and then go from there. Because yeah, they're definitely built to win it. It's just, does Kisnorbo, does he have the backing of the club to get the signings that he wants, if there's a couple of players that he needs to fit into his system, and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see.
It'd be very interesting. I do think he has a shorter fuse to work with as well, at least from the fans. Maybe it's a different story in the boardroom. But, with that former City tag on him, it won't take a whole lot to turn. But again, Fornaroli has shown as well the last 18 months that if you bring, goals for Bruno, but success and wins for Kisnorbo, there is a path there and the fans will forgive you in the end. Of course, that was only one of a couple of other moves, Jacob, we saw in the coaching departments. As we sit here on Thursday night, the other confirmed move is Alen Stajcic from Perth Glory to the Western Sydney Wanderers. Only a 1-year deal, which doesn't provide him, of course, a whole lot of security. But we have, he has his links with the owners, which is potentially why he was picked for this role. And, another go around for the Wanderers next year.
I think from the Wanderers' perspective, it's a move that really makes a lot of sense because Stagich is the sort of guy who doesn't bring a whole lot of baggage to a team. Coming off of Rudan, whose tenure was eccentric to say the least, right? It was there was a lot going on there, and to bring somebody in who's going to be able to just provide a little bit of stability for a while. I mean, he's ridden the waves with the Perth Glory over the last season and a bit, right, where it's been just, again, a whole mess there, and he's been able to, bring them through relatively unscathed. I know they didn't have the best on-field performance, especially in that back half of the season, but there was a point where we were tipping them to make finals. He's not this tactically exuberant manager. He's not going to do things that are going to set the league alight, but he's going to be able to get the Wanderers to just do the basics well. And that's what he was doing with Perth. He was getting them to do the basics well. And if the players went up to it, the players went up to it. There's not a lot he can do about that, right? At the Wanderers, they've not really arguably, they have got the better squad than Perth. You'd expect them to be able to do a lot of the stuff that he was asking Perth to do a lot better. I mean, there's obvious criticisms about the way that he went about things at Perth. I think defensively, the way that he set the side up was quite poor. It was very passive in defence, and a lot of the players looked like they weren't 100% sure on what their responsibilities were defensively. But that's something that, when you've got the likes of Marcelo at the back, who, okay, again, didn't have the best season last season, but was still very, very good in parts, and we've seen the talent that he does have. When you've got somebody like that who can lead the back line, that's going to be a massive help there anyway.
Is he leaving, Marcelo?
Is he? I don't know.
I don't think it's been
anything
confirmed by the club, but there's definitely been some Western Sydney fan groups that have suggested he's departing, and they're usually pretty on the money. So
Wow, well,
I don't
there
think
you
it's
go.
confirmed, but that could be without
Well, I
him.
take back what I said then. It could be another defensive disaster class.
RBTV confirming that the 37-year-old will depart captaining the club for the past 2 seasons. So the RBTV is saying it, and they're usually pretty
They
on
are
the money.
pretty spot on. All right. So, yeah, perhaps it won't be as good for him. But then again, similar position last season where he didn't really have anybody defensively to rely on. So, at least he's gone through it before. But from Stagic's point, it doesn't make a huge lot of sense, right? Like you said, Lockie, there's not, a whole lot of security there with just a 1-year deal. And he's come from a place where there wasn't a whole lot of security because of the whole ownership situation. He's now moving somewhere where there's not a lot of security because he's only got a 1-year deal. I think that really he's entered the market in quite a poor time, I suppose, because of the caliber of other coaches that are out there, right? Like Kisnorbo, you've got Montgomery, who obviously he's not signed in the A-League, he's gone off to Tottenham now with Ange, but was an option out there. And the next one that we'll talk about, who's rumoured to be replacing Stagich at Perth, is David Stagich from Sydney FC. So, when you've got those sorts of names also going around, it's a bit tougher, and I think he's probably just figured, well, I've got these connections with the owners. It's a chance to, prove again that I can at least stabilize the core of a team a little bit and go from there. And, if he does well, they'll extend him. If not, there's not a lot lost for the Wanderers. And for him, it's a case again of reevaluating where he's at and what his best move is. But no, it's an interesting one, only a 1-year deal, because for both parties, you'd have thought they'd want a bit more of a long-term plan in place, especially for the Wanderers, coming off the back of Rudan and all of the turmoil there. To look to set up the future of the club would have been huge. And for Stagich to be able to get that security, to be able to put a plan in place and a project in place, would have been invaluable for him as well. So it does seem a little bit weird, but I guess, we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, so that Zrilic move, we do know that multiple sources are saying that Perth will announce their new manager on Friday. It's very likely that by the time that you're listening to this, that the official announcement has taken place. There is a lot of mail suggesting that David Zrilic will be that man. Of course, the assistant at Sydney FC this year, and widely credited for instigating this, Leipzig-style press into Sydney's gameplay towards the back end of the season. But if that is confirmed, and perhaps we'll talk a little bit more about him when the deal is confirmed, but that will be the last one. That fills the boat for the 24-25 A-League men's season, and teams are now starting to come back for pre-season. Most have about a month until their first Australia Cup game. Of course, the bottom 4 sides have a little bit less than that, but it's coming around quite quickly. Hey, Jacob.
Yeah, what's up?
When you're playing football, would you prefer to play with an old, gross, torn-away ball with a bunch of bumps on it, or a perfectly shaped, clean one that they use in international matches?
Well, I mean, the easy answer, the second one.
Well, you're in luck, because Deploy Football are sponsoring this episode of the pod. Proudly Australian-owned and operated since 2012, they are one of only 2 Aussie brands to ever receive the FIFA Quality Pro license. That's the tippity-top for footballs.
I mean, that is pretty good, but, we've got the ball. There's still another problem.
What's that?
Well, with the season that Adelaide have just had, I don't really feel like wearing my United kit when I'm out there on the pitch.
That is very fair. But in that case, you can go and get your own custom kits from Deploy as well. Fully sublimated on just a 15-day turnaround with no lock-in contracts for clubs. You can even get your own custom footballs. They've got the largest range of program-specific footballs in the country.
Nice. Sounds to me like we need some gear for the pod.
That is a very good idea. We will have to get on to them about that.
Yeah, we should do that. It would be sick.
Deploy are proud partners of state federations all over the country and offer clubs and individuals the best value for money on footballs, teamwear and equipment. If you want to get the best for your club, head to Deploy and let them know we sent you. Now, the big news today, The Socceroos have learned their fate for the third round of World Cup qualification. Now, they've drawn both Japan and Saudi Arabia in this group. Now, this is the third round. We were always going to get one of the big teams in Japan, Iran or South Korea. But Saudi Arabia, that's the stickler. That's the unfortunate draw, purely in terms of our chances of getting out of the group. So we've talked about this plenty, but the FIFA World Rankings after the last window determined what pot everyone was going to be in, and then we draw from there. So Iraq actually overcame a 23-point gap in the latest window to pip Saudi Arabia into pot 2, and then Saudi Arabia dropped down. And for some added context, Australia's 2 wins in that window only gained us 7 points. So for a gap between two teams to close by 23 points in just one window is quite large. So not many people are expecting it. South Korea dropped some points. They dropped down to pot 3, and just this Australia's luck that they happen to be in our group. It's a little bit unfortunate, Jacob, but we have been talking that with the added room for error, with the additional spots in Asia this time around, it is a good test to be able to play some competitive games against the best teams in Asia.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the top 3 of that group, right? Japan, Australia, Saudi Arabia. That's the best top 3 in any of those 3 groups. So it is in some ways a bit of a group of death, especially for those lower ranked teams in the group that, you've got basically all things going well, your top 3 sorted right there. It's going to be really tough for any of, Bahrain, China or Indonesia to break into the top 3 or even that third spot. So it's going to be like you said, a good test for Australia to see really where they stack up in terms of Asian teams. And I know we've just had the Asian Cup and sort of know roughly where we sit in terms of the pecking order, but this is, directly, we're playing for the World Cup here now, and there is that little bit of room for error, but there's still not a whole lot, right? You can't drop too many points because you'd expect the bottom 3 to be taking points off of each other and things like that. So you never quite know. Nothing's ever certain in football, but no, it'd be good. It does suck that it's not as easy as it could have been, but on the other hand, it's a good test, like you said, and there'll be entertaining matches at least. That's the other thing as well is that we probably won't be too bored, in the games against Japan and Saudi Arabia. They should be good ones. So no, I'm excited to see what happens. I think that, like you said, just it's going to be a good test. And if Australia really wants to again get to the World Cup again, make a good run and prove themselves as a top team in Asia, then you've got to beat these sorts of teams. You've got to beat your Japans, you've got to beat your Saudi Arabias, and there's no two ways about that. And this is, a big chance to do that, and it's a big chance to set themselves up nicely for another World Cup run.
So this is how the stage works. There's 18 teams split up into 3 groups of 6. You play home and away, 10 games each. The top 2 straight into the World Cup 2026 in North America. Bottom 2 drop out, no chance. The 3rd and 4th, so right in the middle of each group, go into the 4th rounds where there's a centralised single round robin for the final 2 spots, and then there's intercontinental playoffs, and there's actually a new playoff tournament this year that FIFA are running as well. So there is this kind of repechage system here, Ross, if the Socceroos do finish below Japan or Saudi Arabia, or Bahrain, China or Indonesia pull out a mad one as well and get into the top 2, that would be quite an effort from them. But if Australia and Graham Arnold and the players are really serious about progressing and becoming a top 15 nation and competing for trophies and doing better than the round of 16 of the World Cup, then we really should be qualifying at the first time of asking.
We should be, but we do say this every single World Cup qualifying cycle. Like we always...
That's true.
We have Japan and Saudi Arabia every time, and we've always just lost out to them. So it's kind of a bit tricky. But I think, we've got a safety buffer, as Jacob said, as you've said. But we'll see how we go. I mean, you'd hope they get through. We'll definitely get through in the 4th round, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Is it the 3rd cycle in a row that we've had Japan and Saudi Arabia in the main qualification phase?
2018, 2022, then 2026, yeah.
Yeah, so plenty of history there. So it'll just be another chance. In terms of the group of death tag that, we love to throw around at these, you probably look at Group B, and I would argue you have Korea, Iraq, Jordan, Oman, and Palestine, and then Kuwait's the sixth team there. That's probably the most competitive full 6-team list. But you look at Group C with Japan, Australia, and Saudi Arabia, specifically the teams that'll be fighting for those 2 automatic spots. That's a tough draw for those 3 teams. I think we will. Yep. I think the loss to Japan at home during the last cycle was the first home game we'd lost in a long time. So they'll be eager to set that straight. We talked a lot during the last window about the changes that have been made tactically, the new 2-striker formation and how that's, the domino effect of that and how it's moving back to the defensive line. I do think the changes are encouraging. I think we have the ability to beat good teams. Our exit from the Asian Cup, I've really tried not to think about it too much because it really was brutal. The late penalty and then the free kick from Son. So we've showed that we can do it against the best teams in Asia, even when we're not particularly playing our best. At least that was the perception. So I think we can absolutely take it to Japan, and we'll be close with Saudi Arabia potentially, but I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't be favourites to go through, at least in second position.
I think maybe Saudi Arabia might be the one that we're competing for. I think we can all agree that Japan are probably the favourites to advance.
To
finish top of the group. Even in past, we lost both times to Japan, the last qualifying phase. They always seem to just outdo us. Sometimes we have a lot of possession, but, Japan just hit us at the crucial times. They take their opportunities and we're just left wondering, what could have been. Japan just have that edge over us for some reason. Then Saudi Arabia, I think they're going to be the main challenges for that second spot. I'm not saying we can't make top 2. Obviously, we've got the quality to do so, but yeah, it's going to be extremely tight. Really going to be nerve-wracking.
It will. One last bit of domestic news before we head overseas. The Tasmanian bid for a team in the NST could already be over the line. That report coming out of SEN's Tassie Breakfast with Tim Payne and Brent Costellos. Not exactly one of our usual sources for football news, but that is what they were saying. I think we were all hoping that there will be a little more representation in terms of where those extra 2 or 4 teams are coming from around the country. Obviously, the initial 8 just from Victoria and New South Wales. Now, this should all come out very soon. FA scheduled the completion phase of the expansion process for June 2024. Of course, this podcast is released on the 28th. There's only a couple of days left. So expect news on the NST very, very soon. But let's head to the European Championships. Ross, you've joined us especially for this, so I'll go to you first. We now know our round of 16, our knockouts bracket. The knockout stage is set, and it appears, at least on the surface, right, that it's a little bit of a lopsided draw. I think there's a little bit of deception to that because at the end of the day, it's balanced so that the group winners get split up. So, it's the performance in the group stage that's split. But definitely in terms of the big footballing names, one side of the bracket is heavily weighted. You've got Spain, Germany, Portugal, and then France versus Belgium in a round of 16 clash is massive as well. And then on the other side, you've kind of got the underperforming Netherlands, England, Italy, right? So there does seem like a bit of a split. But that the tournament is set up so that the teams that are performing in the group stage do get spread around. So maybe it's impossible to have a way to draw. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as you just said, all the teams you've mentioned had a shot at winning before as well. They were probably most favourites going into this tournament. I guess it's just how it's worked out. Like, you'd think on that weaker side of the draw, England, Italy, Netherlands, one of them 3, whoever wins it goes the whole way, you'd think. But looking good. I'm excited.
It's going to be a lot of fun, absolutely. If we look outside of those kind of stereotypically big nations, Jacob, that Austria-Turkey looks like a very fun fixture, if nothing else. Yeah. Outside of those kind of big countries, Austria has been the team that's impressed me the most, and Turkey's not far behind. So in terms of where that kind of fairy tale run could come from, the winner of that game will play the winner of Romania and the Netherlands. I think that's a nice little path for one of those two teams.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, the Netherlands will be licking their lips, obviously, as well, because they think if they can get past Romania, they're going to have one of Austria or Turkey, which they'd favour themselves in. But then, like you said, the flip side is true, where, Austria or Turkey, that's not the worst. That's probably one of the better of all of the possibilities. But having to choose between Romania or Netherlands is probably the best choice that you could have, especially on that side of the draw. So, that's definitely a very exciting one. And then, team I've just spoken about, Romania. I know Ross is very high on them and has occasionally tipped them to do big things, but they could be a dark horse as well, because if they manage to sneak past the Netherlands again, they've got an Austria or a Turkey to play against, and Austria have looked very strong. Turkey have looked a little bit sort of inconsistent at times. Who knows what happens there? It's going to be a whole lot of fun, definitely.
And Christian, this is really where the tournament starts as well. It does feel specifically for us Australians, this is where it starts because, the jeopardy of the final group stage round is so fun, but unless you're willing to watch the 2 and 5 a.m. games in a row, you kind of don't get that live experience of the two games being played at the same time. So it's knockout football. Someone's got to win. England are going to have to do something. They can't just sit back and, a goal has to be scored at some point. This is where it gets really real. What are you looking forward to when you look at this draw?
I mean, the obvious game that sticks out is France-Belgium. I think Belgium can, if it's an upset, I think they can cause an upset. We saw France get knocked out to Switzerland at the same stage last Euros. And France haven't scored a goal from open play at this tournament. They've scored an own goal, nil drawn it, and Mbappe scored a penalty. So up front, I think the XG is like 5 point something over the 3 group games, but if you can't put the ball in the back of the net, it's a different story. So, and the same goes with Belgium. Lukaku's had about 3 disallowed goals in this tournament. He's probably the unluckiest forward in this competition so far. So I guess it's going to be a nil draw written all over it and straight to penalties by the looks of it. But that's obviously the standout. Like you mentioned, Austria-Turkey is going to be another one. Just really good contrasting styles. Ralf Rangnick at Austria, he's doing really well. The only concern I've got with them is, their high press. Can they sustain that for a deep run?
Yeah, incredibly rough on Ukraine as well while we're in that group to finish equal on points with the top but miss out on goal difference. That's a brutal way to go. On your point about Belgium and specifically Romelu Lukaku, I think it was after the second match day, I saw someone had a goal chart of like the Golden Boot runners, and there was a couple of players on 2 goals. Then it was Romelu Lukaku without VAR was on 3 goals, and then own goals was like 6, and it's just no like big scorer was taking control of the competition. But with Belgium, I just feel like the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like they've since their last major tournaments, Jeremy Doku is an incredible addition. You've obviously got KDB. And they're all feeding the ball just for Lukaku to keep not scoring goals. I know he scored, I don't know where he scores them because he's like the record goal scorer for Belgium, right?
Yeah.
But I just feel like every time I watch him at a major tournament, he's not scoring goals, Rossi. He just can't put them away. And if he does, they're illegal.
And he broke the record in qualifiers for the most goals by an individual player in a qualifying campaign as well, which is, if he goes into that, he should bring the form into the tournament. I think he's just getting unlucky. I think Belgium's a little bit... they're a bit unconvincing, but we'll see, because this is the best team they've played for a while, so we'll see if that works out for them.
But it's interesting, we say, none of the strikers have really taken charge of the goal charts, Jacob, but I'd argue no team has really taken control of the tournament. We only have one team in Spain that have won every single game, and it must be said their final one they did with the second string 11 as well. So if anyone, probably them. But it really does feel like this tournament is wide open, which is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, it's not just a case of England underperforming, is it? I mean, it's Germany perhaps not performing to the level that everyone was expecting, having them heading into a home tournament. It's France underperforming relative to the level that they've set recently in the World Cup and things like that. It's a lot of these teams just... I don't know what it is, if they're not finding the groove, if they're just, if these slightly lower ranked teams have improved over the years to the point where they are a legitimate challenge now and it's not just an easy waltz through the group stages. You're definitely right in that no team has looked massively convincing outside of Spain, and I do actually kind of like that because it makes things a bit exciting. When we did the predictions for who we thought was going to make it all the way through, it did feel a bit samey with the same big teams, and we were like, yeah, it's going to be them, but But with how it stands now, I think we'd probably pin in a couple of upsets. I think Denmark could do a job over Germany, for instance. I mean, we've touched on England and Italy perhaps not being in the best form of their life and coming up against teams that might capitalize there. You know, it's exciting, and this is what tournament football's all about. You know, it can get very boring at times, but when you've got, you know, things like this where, look, you're going to have probably one of those four on that strong side of the bracket not make it through, and that's a great prospect right there, because you're losing one of the favorites in the round of 16. So no, I'm really, really excited to see what happens, and you know, whoever can just hold their mettle the most is going to be obviously the one that wins it. But you know, you've said, Lockie, that nobody's stamped their mark on the tournament. Maybe it's they've not stamped their mark on the tournament yet. Maybe one of these teams is going to go on some insane run to the final and win it all. And that's all. That's sort of that unknown, right? Is that we don't quite know which team that's going to be. You'd say Spain probably the favourites to do it, but there's a lot of quality teams there that haven't been performing to the level we'd expect. So who knows what could happen?
And that's the brilliance of these tournaments, right? Like, as much as we talk about individual teams, and you go into you know, a 24 or a 32 team tournament, and you think it's so unlikely that you're looking at one specific team that they can go on and win. The flip side is someone does have to win. Someone does have to go on a run and get to the final. And, you know, it's incredible that there's going to be a story there. You don't even have to get to the final to have that kind of success story. I know you're pretty excited about Georgia as well. They beat, it must be said, an undermanned Portugal, but just for them to get out of the group stage was incredible.
They almost seem primed to do sort of like Greece did in 2004, right? You know, they're sort of, everybody's written them off a bit at this stage now. They're like, okay, it was great you made it through. Well done, guys. And it's like nobody's taking them seriously, but you never quite know, right? And that is the beauty. And, you know, you did touch on, they've got the only player who does actually seem to have brought his shooting boots with him in George Mikitadze. Kvaratskhelia as well, who's quality, as we know. Yeah, they could do something. I think if they get past Spain, you never know, but that is a big ask in the first place. I know, Ross, obviously, you are Greek yourself. Do you see sort of the similarities there to that 2004 campaign?
I mean, it's a bit difficult to talk about considering they knocked us out of the playoff to get into this tournament in the first place.
That's true.
However, to be honest, if any team's going to do it, I'd like to lose to the winners. So let's go.
Winners in Georgia, very nice. It's funny, Jacob, I was watching the final England game of the group stage, and I was thinking back to 2018 where they were in this weird position where it was almost advantageous not to finish top of the group.
Yeah.
And they got the draw and got on the easier side. Well, this was the case where they had to win to get on the easy side of the draw, and they almost didn't do it. Like, obviously it was a 0-0 draw, and a loss would have sent them further down in the group. But just the irony of the entire situation. And, you know, we've been building it up for the last couple of weeks, but England would meet Italy in a quarter-final. That will be a replay of the Euro 2020 at Wembley Stadium.
Is it also an advantage for Italy that they haven't played in the last two World Cups, so they don't have anything there to haunt them? Yeah, that's right. They've got a good amount of rest.
Oh, dear. Ross, who's your final? You've had a chance to watch all of the teams now. 3 group games each. We know the path. Who do you think's going to be standing there on the 15th of July, Australian time?
I've backed Germany from the start, so I'm going to say Germany against probably a Netherlands. I'm going to say. I think Netherlands get up, depending on. I mean, Romania's underdogs here, so we'll see how Romania go. But I think it's going to be a Netherlands-Germany final. I think.
See, Germany were my hot tip going into the tournament. I think the quarterfinal potentially between them and Spain is going to be massive. Yeah. I think the winner of that game makes the final and probably goes on to win it. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a smoky out there and say Austria.
Interesting.
I think in terms of, Christian, you made a good point about do they have a style that can be managed sustainably all the way. I reckon it gets them to the final, and that's where they burn out. And we saw Croatia do the same thing in the 2018 World Cup as well. So that's my tip. I like Ralf Rangnick. We talked in the Copa America about Uruguay and Marcelo Bielsa. I think that same kind of fit is there for Austria and Ralf Rangnick. This kind of director, kind of big macro football people, I wouldn't have expected it to happen so quickly, but they've been tremendous. Austria tops a very competitive group, so they're my smoky to go the distance as well. Jacob?
Yeah, I'm with you in that early on had Germany pegged in for the final. I thought that Kai Havertz would have a massive tournament, and he hasn't had that hat trick yet, so it's still coming. But it is tough to look past them. But Spain have looked by far the best team so far this tournament, and yeah, okay, Georgia beating them would be a nice story, but on paper they get up there. And then they're facing one of Germany or Denmark, and with the way that they've played, I'd say that they probably get through. So I'm going to have Spain in on one side, and then the Netherlands is a good shout. I do like that one. Austria, yeah, I don't have faith in England to make it past the semi-finals if they get there.
Surprising.
And Italy, do Italy manage to get through? I might go Spain, Netherlands, a replay of the 2010 World Cup final. I do like that shout from Ross in that, maybe the Netherlands just seem the least problematic of all of the teams on that side of the draw, and could potentially be the ones to go all the way. So yeah, just throw it out there, Spain, Netherlands.
I actually do have a lot of faith in England. I'm not quite as pessimistic as you, Jacob. I think the fact that they've only conceded one goal, top the group, haven't lost a game, is still good. And I completely agree with your argument that you made last week that potentially Southgate sets his teams up in a way that gets deep very often, but maybe can't win it. And I'm very aware of that possibility. But I'm always hesitant to just tip them to get places because I don't want the receipts to cash in later. But I will
say the defensive record is very, very good. Obviously, the lowest expected goals conceded of any team in the tournament. But I mean, there's not been a huge number of goals anyway. No. First of all, but I mean, it would be so good for England to win it all, playing the most just dire football ever seen by man. That would perfectly sum it up. There's a great thing I saw though of some England fans. One of them had got a white T-shirt and had written on it, "Goals are overrated," and was wearing this shirt. So, that would be a great story of going through and scoring one goal a game and winning it all would be great. But no, I stand by my point that I think that they can go deep, but I don't think that they've got enough there to win it. They just don't have that mentality really in any of the players. I know that there's Phil Foden, Kyle Walker, Jude Bellingham, who are playing for these clubs that do win trophies, but especially at a national level, it's just been a case of too many times not getting there, right? And when your talisman up front isn't scoring at the rate that he usually is, and he's never won anything in his career, and it does seem like there's sort of almost a lack of experience of just jumping and getting over that final hurdle, which is holding England back a little bit. And then you've got the manager who has never necessarily really won anything in his career. I just don't think that they have enough to make that final step personally.
Yeah.
I loved a line from Barney Ronay, who wrote in The Guardian on the final group game for England. And he said, it was along the lines of, with all this chat of football's going to come home, could you imagine if football is going to come home and this is what football looks like?
Yes.
How can we close the blinds, lock the door, keep it away? We don't want it. But you're right. The irony of, even potentially going on and winning the tournament, playing the way they are, dear oh Lord, it's not like what we see in clubland, isn't it? A lot of the high end teams now are trying to play, aggressive, high possession, domination, create plenty of chances. It's fascinating how different the international game is to clubland. I'm sure a lot of people aren't aware this is going on. The finalists of the OFC, O being Oceanic Nations Cup, will be played in the next couple of days between Vanuatu and New Zealand. But the incredible story here is one that links back to the A-League. So the semi-finals were played on Thursday, and the game between Fiji and Vanuatu, captained by Roy Krishna and Brian Kaltak, two cult legends of the A-League. So really, really cool to see that link in Oceanic football as well. and of course our dear friends from across the ditch, the Kiwis, crashing it as usual in the Oceanic competition. But yeah, the final is in a couple of days, so stay tuned for that as well. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Jacob Stevens, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Lockie. And can I just take a moment to appreciate the fact that Rondon's name was mentioned in a podcast in 2024? How old is that guy now? Like, what, 107? Like, he's been going forever, so...
And when was he, like, the OP FIFA signing? It was like 2015 or something like that. He was the guy. Yeah. And Ross Papadakis as well for the Euros chat. Thank you, mate. And a big thank you as well to Deploy Football for supporting our independent coverage of the game in Australia. All right, thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate your company very much. We'll be back on Tuesday for another wrap of all the latest in Australian football news and of course all these international championships as well. But thank you all for listening. Goodbye.